All right, today we're diving into one of the wildest, most audacious missions of the Second World War. We're talking about Operation Vengeance. So, picture this. It's 1943, and you're faced with a question that sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie. How do you take out an enemy's top general when he's 1,000 miles away, completely surrounded by his own forces? Well, for the US military, this wasn't hypothetical. It was a very real and very dangerous problem. And this was the target. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. What's chilling is that this photo was actually taken just hours before he died. He wasn't just any commander. He was the mastermind of Japan's war in the Pacific. And to America, he was the face of Pearl Harbor.
So you have to ask, why him? Why risk everything, pilots, top secret intelligence, to take out this one man? What made Yamamoto so important?
Well, Yamamoto wasn't just another admiral on a ship. He was the commander-in-chief of the entire Japanese fleet. The guy was the strategic brain behind their whole Pacific campaign. Taking him out wouldn't just be symbolic revenge for Pearl Harbor. It would literally cripple Japan's naval command, potentially for the rest of the war. So the goals for the US were pretty simple and really personal. First, you've got revenge for Pearl Harbor. That's a big one. Then you've got the chance to absolutely shatter Japanese morale, while at the same time giving the Allies a huge, much-needed boost. It was a high-risk, high-reward kind of deal. Honestly, this whole mission should have been nothing more than a fantasy. It was just too risky. But then there was an unbelievable stroke of luck. Or maybe it was a stroke of pure genius from a secret group of codebreakers. And that secret weapon had a code name, Magic. You see, Magic was the top-secret U.S. program that had done the impossible. It had cracked Japan's supposedly unbreakable naval codes. And on April 14, 1943, the codebreakers intercepted a message that changed absolutely everything. Just look at the level of detail they got. The Americans didn't just know Yamamoto was gonna be on a flight. No, they knew his exact route, the exact minute he would depart, the exact minute he would arrive, and the exact number of bombers and fighter escorts he'd have with him. It was a golden opportunity laid out on a silver platter. You know, this intelligence went all the way to the top. The Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, gave the unofficial nod, "Get Yamamoto." And Admiral Nimitz, the commander of the entire Pacific Fleet, gave the final green light. Now, you gotta remember, the decision to target a specific enemy commander, that was controversial even back then. It's a debate that's still going on today. But in this case, the mission was a go.
Okay, so you've got the intel. That's the easy part, but acting on it, that was a whole different story. The plan they came up with was, frankly, a logistical nightmare. It was gonna push both the pilots and their planes to the absolute breaking point.
And here's the central challenge. The flight from their base on Guadalcanal was a 1,000-mile round trip. They couldn't just fly straight there. That whole area was crawling with Japanese radar and spotters. So they had to take this huge, looping detour way out over the open ocean to have any chance of staying hidden. And if that wasn't dangerous enough, they had to fly that entire distance just 50 feet above the water. 50 feet. They were literally skimming the waves. This kind of wave hopping was the only way to stay under Japanese radar. But think about it. One little mistake, one moment where your concentration slips, and your plane just cartwheels into the ocean. There was only one plane in the entire Pacific that could even attempt this mission, the P-38 Lightning, and even it needed special long-range fuel tanks just to make it. The pilots chosen were from the 339th Fighter Squadron, a mix of skilled veterans and hotshot young aces who were basically being asked to do the impossible.
So the plan is set. The pilots are in the air. After all the planning and all the risk, everything came down to just a few critical moments in the sky over the jungles of Bougainville.
I mean, just think about this timing. After a grueling 2-hour flight in total radio silence, they hit their intercept point at 9:34 a.m., 1 minute early. 1 minute! And then, right on schedule, at 9:35, Yamamoto's planes show up right where they were supposed to be. The whole fight, from the first contact to the final kill, was over in something like 5 minutes. Incredible. And you have to remember, this was all done without GPS, without radar, without any of the tech we take for granted. The mission leader, Major John Mitchell, navigated that 1,000-mile trip using just his compass, his watch, and a technique called dead reckoning. It is still considered one of the greatest feats of pure navigation in the history of flight.
And this was the result. The next day, a Japanese search party found the crash site. They found Yamamoto thrown from the plane, but still upright in his seat. The mission was a total success. But, believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. Yeah, almost as soon as the pilots got back to base, a controversy started that would last for the rest of their lives. Everybody agreed the mission worked. But the question was, who actually deserved the credit?
So let's lay out the undisputed facts. 2 Japanese bombers were destroyed. 0 of the escorting 0 fighters were shot down. And among the 20 people killed was Admiral Yamamoto. So nobody was arguing about the result. The argument was all about who was responsible for it.
The whole thing really centered on 2 pilots. You had Thomas Lamphere, who claimed he got into a big dogfight with the escorts and then wheeled around to blow the wing off Yamamoto's bomber. But then you had Rex Barber, who said, no, I came up right behind the bomber and lit up its engines and fuselage, and that's what sent it down. 2 very different stories.
But the physical evidence, it seemed to tell a pretty clear story. Over the years, multiple teams inspected the wreckage, and they all pretty much came to the same conclusion. The bullet holes came from the rear. And that strongly supported Rex Barber's version of the events. But despite that evidence, the Air Force officially gave them shared credit for the kill. The debate was just never settled, and both men went to their graves, each believing he was the one who fired the fatal shots. Operation Vengeance is often looked at as one of the first modern targeted killings of a foreign military leader. It set a precedent for tactics that are still used and debated today. And it leaves us with a question that's just as tough now as it was in 1943. In the brutal art of war, where do you draw the line?